All right, our second topic is the latest updates on exercise for people with Parkinson's disease. So the important question is, why couldn't the personal trainer get evicted? He was squatting. All right. Our next speaker is Michael Braisch. He is a licensed doctor of physical therapy, assistant clinical professor of the physical therapy at Texas Women's University in Dallas. He's the founder of Tribe Wellness, an exercise community for people with Parkinson's disease. He has spent the past decade helping individuals with neurological conditions move with greater confidence through specialized programs that blend physical therapy, martial arts, evidence-based exercise. So please welcome Dr. Braisch.
Quite an intro, and I don't know about you. I know I'd love to just hear these jokes all day. Well, my name is Mike Braisch, and I'm a physical therapist, and I feel really lucky to be here and to get to speak with you. I'm convinced that nobody likes what they do as much as I do. And part of that is long before I became a physical therapist, I was kind of addicted to exercise. I grew up doing martial arts. I used to compete around the country doing a lot of amateur fighting and training fighters. And years later, I read about a hero of mine, Manny Pacquiao's coach, Freddie Roach, is a boxing coach. He's quite famous, and he has Parkinson's disease. And he mentioned casually in an interview in Sports Illustrated, gosh, maybe 15 years ago, there's something about training my fighters that helps me manage my symptoms. And I remember when I was in PT school, I met the head of a movement disorders division where I was, Dr. Dewey, and I said to him, hey, what's this about boxing that helps people with Parkinson's? And I was saying it selfishly too, because I love sharing things that I care about, right? But also because my grandmother had an atypical form of Parkinsonism. She had progressive supranuclear palsy, which looks a lot like PD, but it doesn't respond well to meds. And if we knew then what we know now, I think it would have gone a little differently for her. But Dr. Dewey said to me, we don't know why boxing helps. We know exercise is medicine. Why don't you put together a study and let me know what you come up with? And he wasn't kidding. So I put together a study and set up a pilot group, and then that group was successful. That group led to other groups, which led to me for about 8 years, leading 12 to 17 groups a week for people with Parkinson's disease. Some are boxing, some are Tai Chi, some are yoga. We even realized, gosh, we're not doing enough to work on walking mechanics. So we set up a hiking program. I'm taking people hiking in Portugal next year on El Camino de Santiago, the Portuguese trail. I love what I get to do. And if you take nothing else from what we talk about today, hopefully you're taking this. You all know this, but exercise is medicine. And some action is certainly better than none. And hopefully you can take some tweaks to wherever you are on the path today to adjust your program or try something new, because we know variety really makes a difference too. So I've got a lot of slides because like we just heard from our previous speaker, it's easy to just geek out on this stuff. If we want to talk about gait, walking mechanics, I just gave an hour-long webinar last month for another group, and I could have done 3. So I'm going to try to make the most of our time together, and certainly I'm going to get you access to these slides at the end. I got a lot of resources for you, got my contact info. Just know you've got a lot of resources in this very room, and the biggest resource you have is each other. Because any of us know this, but if exercise is medicine for everyone, training on our own doesn't always yield the best results, right? And it's certainly good to have some individualized training. It's even better though, ma'am, what's your name? If Pat and I have plans to work out tomorrow, what do you think the odds are I might lay there in bed and say, I'll get to it later? They're a lot lower, right? Because I know I've got to meet up with Pat. Whether I don't want to look bad or whether I don't want to let her down is besides the point. I got to get there. And we know during our workout, Pat and I are probably going to do better than we would on our own. Maybe because we're encouraging each other. Or maybe just, gosh, I don't want Pat to beat me. Whatever it means, who cares? But the magic happens when we connect with each other and we help each other. So that's why I started my company, Tribe Wellness, because a tribe is a group of people with a purpose. And today, what are we going to do? We're going to dig into some recent updates from the Parkinson Foundation and ACSM's exercise recommendations, some recent changes to their guidance. We're going to talk a little bit about some research studies, and I'm going to try to weave in there some practical tips from running groups and kind of obsessing over this stuff for the last 10 years. So as we go through it, though, I want to give you some challenges. And one challenge is, as we go through our short time together here, the next 25 or so minutes, hopefully you can take note of 2 things that you want to try. Maybe it's a new aspect of something old, or maybe it's something brand new, but hopefully you can pick up 2 new things you want to try. And I always, as a PT, want to give a shout out to my profession and remind you that everyone with Parkinson's disease is a movement disorder, right? And as much as I love groups, we know everybody moves a little differently. And we know that people often get a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease a little later in life. So everybody's moving a little bit differently just from living life. So my plug here is that whether you think you need it or not, hopefully you'll check in annually with a PT so you can get some data. You can see what's moving well, what could use some improvement, and you can track it over time to customize your plan. Because group programs are wonderful, but there's no way, Scott's here, President Higa's here, they run groups. There's no way leading a group of 5 or 10 or 30 people, I can call out every individual thing that you need. So pretty please, find your friendly neighborhood PT and get to know them. We know exercise is a big deal for everybody for a lot of reasons. We know that for people with Parkinson's, it's a much bigger deal because we know Parkinson's disease is a neurodegenerative disorder. We know that exercise, from a recent study, we can prove now from a study that came out in 2024, exercise improves the ability to transport dopamine. It can reverse or slow the worsening of neuromelanin concentration, which is a big deal because neuromelanin is where dopamine is released. And we know that, gosh, the way my buddy Winston says it best, days where I work out, I move better and I feel better. Days where I don't, I don't. He's got some of that West Texas wisdom that's just simple and to the point. So here's an older study, but I love it because I run into people who say, gosh, I don't want to exercise, but I'm sick and tired of how much medication I have to take. And I'm not here to tell you if you work out, you're absolutely going to be able to reduce your dosage of meds. Medication is not my world. I'm a physical therapist. But it is nice to know that there's potential, right? When you exercise, the aerobic training effect kicks in, mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, becomes much more effective and efficient. Dopamine transmission gets better. There's a chance that you could end up operating on a lower level of medication, which is a beautiful thing if you're having side effects. So I just want to give a shout out to that. And certainly we know that Parkinson's disease is a movement disorder. We know that exercise helps address a lot of the motor symptoms for people with Parkinson's disease, but there's so many non-motor symptoms that also can be improved. And certainly medication can't fix everything. So it's really nice to know that the more intense the workout, the more complex the workout. We heard earlier about skill acquisition. The more complex the workout, the better your chances of improving function and addressing some of those non-motor symptoms too. I'll give you an example. I studied boxing and Parkinson's for 5 years. and we published a lot of cool stuff. Some of it we didn't get to publish, and we still had good abstract posters at conferences. But one of them, we looked at non-motor symptoms like apathy, because so many people I know would say, gosh, I know exercise is medicine, I know I need to do it, but man, I don't feel like it. And I get that, because apathy is not anyone's fault. It's not laziness, it's a change in brain chemistry. And we found with our boxing groups in that study is people who processed or used the process of fake it till you make it, the folks that had the worst apathy and non-motor symptom scores had the biggest improvement in those scores. So by the end, we had people who said, God, I didn't want to be here at all, man. And they're looking forward to coming to class. How does that happen? That happens through community and exercise. So there's so many other studies we can look at. This is a big deal one, though, from a few years ago, 2022, because it looked at real people with Parkinson's disease from diagnosis to 6 years out. And they looked at all kinds of different measures. And the biggest measure was physical activity, or the biggest impact to those measures was physical activity level. People who got 150 minutes a week of physical activity fared much better than those who didn't. And then there's a subset of those people who got at least 150 who were doing 300 minutes a week of physical activity. And how do you think they were doing? Even better. And I'm not here to tell you need to jump right into 300 minutes a week if you're not getting there, but it's nice to know that more adds up, and you can gradually work your way to that. So, as Arnold says, there are no shortcuts. Everything is reps, reps, reps. My experience is the shortcut. The long way is the shortcut. So, I've seen people try all kinds of experimental treatments, and my heart goes out to them. But if you're not covering the bases on the basics first, it's hard to find something out there, right? So, a lot of times, if you stay focused on what we know works, you're in a much better place. So how do you get from this textbook picture of a guy with Parkinson's disease to my man Steve doing his Eye of the Tiger signature look? You do it in the words of the exercise guru and godfather of fitness, Jack LaLanne. It's not what you do some of the time that counts. It's what you do all of the time that counts. He had so many great phrases. At 93 years old, he got interviewed and he said, I can't die. That'd be bad for my image. Incredible. So the Parkinson Foundation put out some recommendations. We're going to jump into them here quickly. And recently there were some changes, primarily into the strength training phase of things. And they used to say, aim for more reps. What we're finally saying now is what PTs have been hopeful for. Load the tissue, meaning use resistance. Ditch the 2-pound dumbbells and get to work. So what does this mean for aerobic exercise? Well, let's do a little activity, and you can sit, you can stand, whatever you choose here, but I want to lead you through just a little something here. I'm pretty biased because I love martial arts and boxing. Why not do this? We'll have an agreement where we're not going to whack each other. Okay, so if you want to join in here, let's just do a little aerobic exercise and see how it feels. So you can stand up, you can stay in your chair, you can hang on to a chair if you need to. If you feel like you're at risk of falling, stay in the chair. But we know fighting stance. Feet are about hips width. Hands are up high. Why? Because we want to stay pretty. In the ring, we don't want to get punched in the face, but also we want to try to counteract or prompt some reversal or attention to that postural issue, right? So hands up high, heads up, backs up. Let's get one foot a little bit forward. We'll call that the same side as the front hand. I got my left foot forward. Let's start throwing some jabs with that front hand. Jab is a nice straight punch. We're going to throw them for a while. And why? Because we know upper extremity movements get the heart rate up. With aerobic exercise, we're trying to target a lot of big repetitive movements, and we're trying to get the heart rate up. Why? Because we're pumping blood through the body, and really importantly, we're pumping blood to the brain, which oxygenates the brain. It makes the brain more excitable, which makes it easier to make lasting connections in the brain. It's a beautiful thing. And check your jab right now. A lot of you have gone from big reaching punches to what I call Bruce Lee punches. And don't get me wrong, I'm a martial artist. I love Bruce Lee. But he did this close range martial art called Wing Chun. We know amplitude, size of motions matter. So we want big reaching all the way out and back motions. And we can add a cognitive task to this. So we could say, front hand's the jab, back hand is the cross, right? So we could do an endurance style round right now. We could say, every time we throw a cross, we're adding another jab. So 1, 2 is jab, cross. So jab, cross. We could do endurance style, we'll add another jab each time. So 2 jabs and 1 cross. And we'll add another 3 jabs and 1 cross. We're making all big. 4 and 1. How about 5 and 1? And we could go up, we could add footwork switches, but we're counting. We're counting our reps. We're looking at the size of our motion, and all of a sudden, we can try to boost the bandwidth of the brain when it comes to dual task training, trying to walk and chew gum, or dual task training where it's easier to keep my focus when I'm walking, so that way, when I see Kevin and I'm walking, I don't all of a sudden trip or drag my foot. That's a really big deal for our gang. So aerobic exercise matters, and there's some keys to success. Aim for, you can sit down if you want to, aim for 150 minutes a week of aerobics in a perfect world. Is that doable for everybody? Maybe not right now, but you can work your way up to it. And what I want you to think about too, we jumped right into the action, but aerobic exercise goes even better with a warm-up and a cool-down. So please keep that in mind. And people say, well, what's the best kind of exercise, or what's the best kind of aerobic exercise? Well, I think 3 things for aerobics. 1, the exercise you're going to do safely. Because I'm a PT, I worry when people fall. I don't want them to crack a hip or dislocate a shoulder, or I don't want them to have problems. So safety matters. Also, what matters is consistency, right? The type of exercise you're willing to do consistently and safely. And then also, third, the one you enjoy. And I think that's why a lot of people love dance. We talked about dance for Parkinson's earlier, and we talked about how hula for Parkinson's is a program here. That's incredible. If it's something you want to do, you're more likely to show up, and that's where the magic happens. If you can mix up some variety, it goes even better. And I got a huge list of stuff you could do, but we could do walking, we could do jogging, we could do biking. There's pedal for Parkinson's. We could do an elliptical machine. I love elliptical because it's got that big symmetrical arm movement. It's low impact if you've got arthritis or aches in your knees and hips. You could do pole walking, Nordic walking. There's a great thing out there called urban poling, which are some hiking poles, and they've got a whole exercise routine. You could use a rowing machine as long as it doesn't hurt your back. You could do Zumba Gold, which is a guilty pleasure for some of us. Pretty fun. And the good thing about dance and things like Zumba is when there's music, there's a whole study into something called rhythmic auditory stimulation, where it's easier to initiate movement, it's easier to have symmetry of movement and rhythmicity of movement. Rhythmicity of movement when you're trying to go to a beat. Or as meatheads like I saw in the gym this morning would say, everybody knows in the gym, if a certain song comes on, you can throw an extra 10 pounds on your bench press. Certain songs will just do it. So why not find a way to get some intensity going and find some music? There are a lot of other ways to do this too. Chair aerobics, dancing, boxing, pole walk. I mean, there's so many things. But the big deal with aerobics is intensity. And with intensity, we know that moderate to intense aerobic exercise is what's linked with trying to slow the progression of symptoms. It's harder to define what that means because heart rate data can be thrown off. A lot of folks, because of autonomic changes from Parkinson's disease, they say, well, my heart rate data is not quite as reliable. Or maybe you're taking medications that cap your heart rate, like beta blockers. So I think it's helpful to think of a 0 to 10 modified rating of perceived exertion scale. And the way I explain this to people is 0 out of 10 is like you woke up from a nap. 10 out of 10 is you're going so hard, it's like you're running from the cops. In a perfect world, your exercise routine for intensity would hit somewhere between a 4 out of 10 and maybe an 8 out of 10. I think if you overdo, There's a risk you can burn through medication too quickly in your system. And if you're earlier on in this deal, maybe that's not a big deal. But if you're worried about managing off periods, that could be a problem. So intensity matters, and this is a way to track it. Again, here's our sweet spot, moderate to vigorous exercise. Some studies like to use heart rate, and some people use the old 220 minus age, and say that's your max heart rate. Some people use the Carvonin formula. You probably came here thinking, I don't want to do math, and I don't want to make you do math today. We don't have time for that. I got 11 minutes, right? So I've got an example that you can look at in the slides to work through the math to figure out what's the best ideal target heart rate for you with your aerobic exercise. And I do want to warn you, just from a safety perspective, if you get up to that target heart rate and you feel unsteady, dizzy, unsafe, back off. It's okay. It's okay. Doing something is better than doing nothing, and you can get there over time. To increase your intensity, you can manipulate factors. You can increase the speed. We saw that with our punches. You can increase the resistance. Maybe you hold a can of soup, or you put on a heavy boxing glove that gives you a little resistance, or you hit a punching bag that gives you some resistance. Some people try to hit me in our groups. I don't like that. I stopped fighting. Or you could, on a treadmill, you could change the incline or the grade, and that still helps to increase intensity. So you got a lot of ways to mix it up. For strength training, this is where things have been changing lately. Obviously, strength training matters because all of us, with and without Parkinson's disease, we're going to lose some muscle mass just from living life. And we're going to lose the ability to stay strong just from living life. And with Parkinson's disease, that can be even more pronounced. So whether that's because of protein intake or whether that's because of something else, I don't know. That's maybe we'll get to that. But strength training can help to counteract that. Some people look at it as, for strength training, I'm going to view my physical strength like I view my retirement savings. I want to build up a big nest egg that I can draw down on as I live life. And if you feel like you're weak, don't worry. It's not too late to take action. So there are a lot of ways to get stronger. Weight machines, I think, are the best place to start if you're a beginner or if you don't have a trainer. But, there are people you can work with here that could help you. Free weights are a little bit more advanced. Kettlebells and some body weight stuff takes a little bit more focus. There are a lot of ways to do this, but if you get into Olympic-style weightlifting or CrossFit, hopefully you've got a really good coach that has some very specific training. The common themes are, first and foremost, we walk on our legs, so don't skip leg day. A lot of people do. We want strong legs and hips, please. The recommendations from the Parkinson Foundation at ACSM just changed this year for repetitions. And it used to say 10 to 15 reps in a set. What I'm here to tell you, friends, is if you want to really build strength, you've got to challenge yourself. So hopefully by the time you get to your 10th repetition, you feel like, I need to take a break before the next set. That's an appropriate amount of resistance. If you can do 10, 15, 20, add some more weight. If you're doing so much where you're like, gosh, I can only do 5 or 6, take a little weight off. And I want you to focus on major muscle groups or very functional lifts. Some people say, well, I don't really want to lift weights, but I'm thinking about like my friend Abe, for example. When his grandson was born, you better believe if that kid came out 10 pounds, something ounces, he stopped holding the 8-pound medicine ball because he wanted to be able to lift up his grandson. So resistance matters, and the load you put on tissue matters. If you work with a trainer, or if you got time to dig into this, I've got some chronically weak muscle groups to target. But we got to move forward. Stretching. We want to stretch, and there are chronically tight muscle groups just from living life. Some of those are even more tight because of things like Parkinson-related dystonia or rigidity. One thing that's tricky is oftentimes aerobic exercise can have a positive impact on some of that muscle stiffness, just like it can have with midday fatigue. So if you feel like, gosh, I'm stiff and achy, I don't want to work out, or I'm really tired, I don't want to work out. As long as you can do something safely, you can have a benefit and feel much better afterwards. Dynamic warm-ups certainly help. And if you're doing static holds with stretching, where you hang on to something and hold it, hopefully you're going for a little bit more like a gentle or moderate stretch instead of trying to set a world record stretching yourself, because dystonia and rigidity can lead to even more with an aggressive stretch. So gentle stretching makes a big difference. And what could you do? Shoot, a lot of you are sitting. You could sit at the edge of your chair and just for example, with your hamstrings, the back of your leg, you get that leg out with the heel down, the toes up. You could try to get the knee pretty straight. If you can't straighten, you could scoot your hips further forward in the chair. But all we need is a gentle stretch. A lot of our gym teachers, when they said, "Can you touch your toes?" maybe they were misguided. You know what I mean? It's not as much about touching the toes as it is feeling that gentle stretch on the back of the leg and holding it long enough to benefit. So if something's really tight, 60 to 90 seconds are ideal. You could break it up into 30-second rounds if you need to. Some people say, I just want to get it over with. Other people say, I need to break it up because 90 seconds feels like pure torture. And that's why some people call PTs physical terrorists. I don't agree with that. It's helpful to know, too, that stretching can happen as a result of your workouts. Yoga, people get more flexible. Pilates, people get long and lean. Read flexibility. Tai Chi, there's a lot of flexibility and joint mobility involved there. So it doesn't have to be just a static hold. It could be dynamic stretching. It could be partner stretching if you trust your partner. It could be mobility drills like a foam roller or using a tennis ball to roll out tight muscle tissue. There are a lot of ways to get after muscle tension. But if you're cramping, once those cramps die down, stretch. Stretch that muscle group gently. And I think you'll find some short-term improvements. So here are some chronically tight muscles you can revisit. And the idea here is posture from living life is worsened by Parkinson's disease. And with this type of posture, usually muscles on the front are tight. Usually muscles on the back are weak. I've got some, in those ideas of what to stretch and what to strengthen, I've got that called out a little bit. I grew up watching The Simpsons, so I just love looking at Mr. Burns and saying, okay, let's fight the Mr. Burns posture. I had hoped to be more efficient with my time. I got a few minutes left, but I want you to think about next balance, agility, and multitasking. Balance training. Can you improve your balance from sitting in a chair? Yes, if your seated balance is a major problem. But the general theme with all forms of exercise is figure out what the motor problem is that's giving you the most trouble. And let's embrace taking that challenge on safely. So if you're feeling unsteady on your feet, shoot, let's take a few seconds here just to stand up and do a little balance work, huh? We could stand, if you want, and if you feel safe, you could stand on up, and we could start out just feet together. We're static balance challenge, feet together. And if that feels pretty good and pretty safe with the feet all the way together, you'd progress it. If it doesn't, maybe you'd kind of wiggle walk your feet out a little wider until you feel little unsteady but still safe. We know with strength training, you know you're working hard because muscles are burning. We know with aerobic training, you know you're working hard because your heart rate's up, you're huffing and puffing, maybe you're sweating. With balance training, you're just uncomfortable. That's how you know it's working. So you feel a little unsteady, but not so unsteady that you're going to end up on the floor. You know what I mean? So balance training, could you bring one foot out a little bit further in front of the other and keep a narrow stance? Okay, and if that feels challenging enough, you'd practice holding that. If that feels easy, then maybe you'd bring another foot out in front, right? If that feels easy, maybe you'd practice tapping the toe if you had to try to get time in single limb stance. Putting the foot down when you need to and coming right back up. You could set a timer. You could use a counter for support. There are a lot of ways to do this. If that feels easy, maybe you'd pick it up and try to hold it a little bit. And this is one of the gifts we find in things like Tai Chi. It's why I'm so obsessed with Tai Chi training, because In a clinic, I could say to somebody, hey, why don't you work on single imbalance? Here's a timer. Hold it. Right? But in Tai Chi, maybe we're doing rooster on one leg, and people are practicing the technique, and they're focusing on their breathing, and they're trying to coordinate arm and leg movement, and they know their mind wanders because the technique goes all sideways, and they come right back to doing it over and over and over. And it's easier to get more time on task training balance. So hopefully balance, you're doing weight-bearing training. You can have a seat. Hopefully you're doing multi-directional stepping, not just stepping forward, but out to the side, behind you. If you're somebody that feels like you're losing your balance going backward, hopefully you can really practice stepping back and steadying yourself. How could you do that? Well, you could get near a wall, maybe a couple steps away from a wall, and you could step back and practice steadying yourself. And that way, if you get that phenomenon of retropulsion, where you're losing your balance going backwards, you've got one more tool in your toolkit to try to stabilize and then get right back upright. I love Tai Chi for that. There's so many other ways to do it though. Pilates, dancing, martial arts, Feldenkrais, LSVT, big is the gold standard in a clinic. Power moves. People mention Becky Farley and power moves. Wonderful. There's an app called Clock Yourself, which is fantastic. There are reaction lights. There's something called Oculus, which is a headset where you pretend you got a lightsaber like Luke Skywalker and you're hitting stuff that's shooting at you from multiple directions. Friends, we live in a fantastic time to take on symptoms from Parkinson's disease. I am running out of time, so I want to send you home with another challenge here. Before you leave, I want you to find a buddy to check in with, whether that's tomorrow or next week. And I want you to find a buddy, with that buddy, attend an exercise group together. Maybe it's a different one. And I'll leave you with this. My buddy Steve says it this way. He says, workout groups are a lot like bars. If you go into one and you don't like it, doesn't mean you stop going out. It means you find a different one. So pretty please, see your physical therapist, find a group, and get after it. I've got my contact info and a bunch of resources. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for having me.